Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. We're going to start today's service with the Haven of Rest, which is found on page 409 of your hymnal, and we'll sing the first and fourth verses of 409. We'll continue with the first and fourth verses of 393. It's just like his great love. That's 393. So the announcements are tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock over WBSM 1420 AM 99.5 FM is the Happy Bible Hour, where we are continuing on in the book of John. And that will continue for a while. We have our website, which is peopleschristian.com. And there you find a tab to ask for a Bible if you want. I would hope all of you have Bibles. And if you don't, we have one for you. Also, there's the tabs for the Facebook page and the YouTube page. So if you do miss it and you want to go, especially to YouTube, Facebook's easier to find, but YouTube is very difficult to find if you are looking to watch previous sermons. So again, that's peopleschristian.com. We will be starting out with next month with our holy days, so just keep that in mind. I mentioned last week about Teshuvah. It started on the 16th. I did count it back. It's 40 days. It started on the 16th. I will say I gave up potato chips. And this is tough this time of year because tomato sandwiches are my very favorite. I was telling Betty, I went out at noontime and picked a tomato from my garden and made myself a tomato sandwich. And I do like my potato chips with it. I ate it without. So I did give up something. Again, it wasn't ice cream, but maybe next year. And so again, just a reminder, this is a 40-day period between the 16th of August and the Day of Atonement. And it is a time for setting yourself right with God, actually, because it's a time for repentance and asking for forgiveness and fasting. You can fast any way you like. Fasting can be giving up something. It can be skipping a meal every other day. It can be going a whole day like we do on the Day of Atonement. Fasting is done many different ways. You could go a couple days and just drink water or something like that. So fasting will be a personal thing. Whatever you decide to do is, if you're deciding to do this, those are your choices. It doesn't have to be a full day fast. So just keep that in mind. If you haven't started and you decide today you do want to start, that's fine. You can start at any point. But it is a good time to get yourself ready for the fall holy days. So just keep that in mind. And I think that's it for announcements. Scripture reading today is taken from Judges chapter 14. And we'll be reading verses 1 through 14. So Judges chapter 14, verses 1 through 14. These chapters are all about Samson, much of which I didn't know before. And Samson went down to Timnath and saw a woman in Timnath, the daughter of the Philistines. And he came up and told his father and his mother and said, I have seen a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife. Then his father and his mother said unto him, Is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all my people, that thou goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said unto his father, Get her for me, for she pleaseth me well. But his father and his mother knew not that it was of the Lord that he sought an occasion against the Philistines. For at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. Then went Samson down, and his father and his mother, to Timnath, and came to the vineyards of Timnath, and behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid, and he had nothing in his hand. But he told not his father or his mother what he had done. And he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. And after a time he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. And he took thereof in his hand, and went on eating, and came to his father and mother, and he gave them, and they did eat. But he told not them that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. So his father went down unto the woman, and Samson made there a feast, for so used the young man to do. And it came to pass, when they saw him, that they brought 30 companions to be with him. And when Samson said unto them, I will now put forth a riddle unto you. If ye can certainly declare it me within the 7 days of the feast, and find it out, then I will give you 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. But if ye cannot declare it me, then shall ye give me 30 sheets and 30 change of garments. And they said unto him, Put forth thy riddle, that we may hear it. And he said unto them, Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And they could not in 3 days expound the riddle. And may God add his blessing to this reading from his holy word. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above the heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Today, as we go to God in prayer, let's continue to remember Phyllis and Waldo in our prayers, and anyone else that we know or we've spoken of before this, before the service. Please keep them in your prayers. We know that there are a lot of people going through some difficult times, and so we need to pray for each other on a regular basis, because it is a difficult time out there, and there are things going on in the world that we should expect, and I think once we study the book of Revelation, we'll understand it a little bit more. But you know, we just need to continue praying. It's really should be an important part of our day. So let's look to God in prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you this afternoon thanking you certainly for all that you do for us every day. We know that without your strength, without your love, without the hope that you have given us for a future in eternity, that each day would certainly be more difficult than it is. But we know that when you're walking by our side, when you're guiding us down our path, when you've given us your word that we can study and turn to, that it certainly does make our lives a whole lot easier. Each of us here today can certainly give you praise for something that you have done for us, and we thank you for that. We can also give you praise for the difficulties that have been put in our path, either by a decision that we have made, by the world, by something that you want us to learn, because through all of those difficulties, it seems to bring us closer to you, and it also seems to be a time when we study your word more, and we look to you for the answers. So we thank you for the difficult times also. We know that as we see the day approaching, the time is going to get more difficult, and we certainly are going to be leaning on you more and more, and we are thankful that we are positive and completely sure that you will always be there for us, again, guiding and directing us. As always, I ask special blessings on those that are sick, especially Phyllis and Waldo, those that mourn, those with financial difficulties. I ask for special blessings on our governments throughout the world, knowing that decisions are being made that are going to affect us. I also ask for special blessings and protection on our president and his family, along with our service personnel and their families, first responders, volunteers, missionaries, anybody that deals with the public. We know that they have difficult jobs to do, so please watch over them, take care of them, and bless them. And as always, I pray that every song that we sing and every word that is said is to your name's honor and glory, in your Son's name. Amen. Before the sermon, we are going to sing page 374, Sunshine in My Soul, and we'll sing the first and fourth verses of 374. So we have covered a couple chapters already that deal with Samson. It started out with his mother not being able to have a child, and then an angel appearing and telling her she was going to have a child, and then she gave birth to Samson. And now Samson has grown, and it seems like at this point, we're not told his age, but it seems like he's a little bit of a rebellious older teenager or young adult, just by his, maybe I read it that way too, I don't know, the tone of what he said and how he was sort of going against what his parents wanted. We see that happening all the time with, young adults. We are told that they can't really make good decisions until they hit age 25 when their brain is fully developed. And I do believe there are some people whose brains never fully develop, but that's a whole nother sermon. But so he is grown, and he's going with his parents to a place called Timnah because he had seen, and it doesn't say anything more than he had seen her. It doesn't say that he had any contact with her, that he took her out on a date or anything like that. It just says that he had seen this Philistine woman and that he wanted to marry her. He asked his parents to get this wife for him, and of course, because of what God had told them, they wanted him to marry an Israelite woman, because God had said, don't intermarry with the tribes that are in this land that I'm giving you, the land of Canaan. Now, some could argue that the Philistines were not basically in that land that God had given them. They were really outside of it. But they had still been going after the Israelites, and they still were idol worshippers. So we know that God would definitely have been against this. But we're told that his parents didn't realize, and sometimes in our lives we don't realize it either, that God was actually using the situation to give Samson occasion to have some conflict with the Philistines, which is basically what he was there for. Now remember, he was also a Nazirite, which means he wasn't supposed to cut his hair, he wasn't supposed to have wine or anything to do with grapes and whole sorts of other things. He wasn't supposed to touch a dead body and all that. So anyway, Timnah was in the Philistine territory, so that means he had gone out of Canaan and gone into the Philistine territory. And there was kind of a relaxed relationship between the Israelites and the Philistines. They would go back and forth in between the two territories, but the Philistines did have dominion over the Israelites. Basically, they ruled them. They had a say in what the Israelites were doing. Now, as we look at the objection of Samson's parents to this marriage, we know, again, that intermarriage was forbidden by God, specifically forbidden by God, especially to the nations that were idolatrous, because usually what happens is people will tend to take the easy way, and those religions were probably considered maybe a little bit more fun because they would have, parties around their gods and all sorts of things going on that we don't really want to talk about, and so it probably looked a little bit more fun than worshiping God. So God had specifically forbidden it. When the account says that Samson marrying this Philistine girl was of the Lord, it doesn't necessarily mean that God was approved of it or encouraged it. Basically what it's saying is that the choice that Samson made, God took advantage of it to do something with it. And this happens many times. It happened with Judas and with the Sadducees and Pharisees with Jesus. It isn't necessarily that God said you're going to do this, but they were evil already, and God used that fact to use them to take care of what needed to be done. Um, Samson's choice of women, as we'll see throughout this, was not necessarily good. It seems as if he was choosing this particular woman on the basis of physical beauty and emotional attraction. And basically, he had no one to blame but himself. You know, if you do choose just because a person is beautiful outwardly and you don't really know them, then more than likely in marriage it's going to fail. Even after 47 years of marriage or 50 some or whatever it is, there are still things that you learn about a person. Some good, some bad, you know. And let's face it, what we looked like at 18 is not what we look like now. And so if we chose, if you had someone that chose you because you were absolutely beautiful and all of a sudden you're 70 and don't look so great, where's the stableness in that marriage? But Samson, again, seemed like he was a little wild, seemed like he wanted what he wanted, as from, and I did put a little inflection in it, which I probably shouldn't have when I read it, but he was practically telling his parents, I don't really care what you say, this is the woman I want. And so they did it. And this seems like that he was also a little spoiled, doesn't it? They didn't put any, fight up. They just said, okay, Samson, we'll go do what you want to do. And they went and planned everything for this particular wedding or his wife. There is, by the way, archaeological evidence that the Philistines existed, because we know that when people want to put the Bible down, they'll say, well, that didn't really happen. It's not part of history. It's not part of written history. But there is evidence that the Philistines tried to come into the delta of Egypt, and it is on the monuments of Ramses III, king of Egypt. So there is archaeological evidence that the Philistines actually existed. So Samson then goes to Timnah, and the account, of course, says that he went with his mother and father, and they were traveling together, but it seems like Samson went off a little bit on his own. Maybe he went into the woods to go to the bathroom. You know how that has to happen. We're not told. Again, we're never told exact details, but he went a little bit away from his parents, and he came upon a lion. And the account here tells us that he basically took the lion and ripped it apart. And he ripped it apart as easily as he would have a kid, meaning a goat, which is a much smaller animal, much weaker animal, which really goes to show us that Samson at this point was very strong. And it says that the account says that the Spirit came upon him. So that means that he was given the strength needed at that time in order to kill this particular lion. And again, this is the first indication of the amazing strength that he had. We know lions, and especially a young, strong lion, are dangerous. It would have taken skill and strength just to kill this lion with a weapon. But Samson didn't use a weapon. He just used his hands. This account of Samson and also of other Old Testament characters, sometimes it is mentioned that the Spirit of the Lord came upon them and they were enabled to accomplish great deeds. And sometimes it meant that they spoke something that God had put on their hearts. Sometimes it means that they were under the direct guidance of God to do a particular thing, like Jonah going to a particular city. We know he didn't, and then he was in trouble, of course. The idea here seems to be more that the power of God worked through Samson and all of these other characters in the Old Testament to accomplish the deed that they needed to accomplish at that time. In this case, empowered with great strength to kill this lion. So Samson and his parents then continue on their journey, and they come off to visit the woman. And he found that he was still pleased with her. She must have still looked pretty good to him. So he's still all set with marrying her. This was apparently the first visit they had to arrange the wedding. Sometime later, Samson was going to see her. Perhaps this was actually the time for the wedding. We're not given a time frame here at all. It's just obviously some time happened between the meetings, but we're not told. And he's passing the same place that he killed that particular lion. And he goes to see the carcass. We don't know why, he just does. And when he goes, he finds that a swarm of bees has now made their home there, and there is all this honey, and he eats some of the honey, and then he gives some honey to his parents. But he doesn't tell them where he got the honey from. So no one knows about the death of the lion, and this is going to really have an effect on what happens coming up. Now, Samson is the Nazarite, so he's not supposed to touch a dead body. But, you know, you don't have to necessarily touch the dead body to get the honey that's in it. So that's a possibility. And it also may be that this dead body was not human, so he wouldn't have necessarily gone against the vow that he made. But if so, he would have had to renew his vow at that point. But again, we're not necessarily given exact details of what happened. It's not stated. So in verses 10 through 13, Samson's father goes to the woman, presumably to make final wedding preparations. It was the parents' job to do this. And they began the wedding celebration. A little bit different than how we celebrate now. It began by Samson giving a feast for the young men. This was a tradition in the weddings in that area. The feast was going to last 7 days, and since Samson had not brought any of his friends with him, he only traveled with his parents, the family got him some Philistines to celebrate with him for the 7 days. So they're celebrating, and Samson then suggested that he was going to pose a riddle for his companions. Remember, they're not his friends. They're probably just people he just met. And so he is celebrating with these people, and he says, I'm going to give you a riddle. And if you can come up with the answer to the riddle in 7 days, if you answer it correctly, then I'm going to give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. Vice versa, if he could not solve it. If they could not solve it. So if they couldn't solve it, they would give it to him. We know, I like riddles and mind puzzles. And it seems like even then people were interested in them. Once you click on something on Facebook, more of it comes up. And I keep getting math problems. And I keep clicking on them to see if I can still solve them. I find it fun. I'm sorry to say, maybe that says I'm a little bit of a geek, but riddles and problems like that, I enjoy doing things like that. So what was Samson's riddle? Samson's riddle was, out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. Now, we know the story. We know exactly what happened. We know what Samson did. We know what Samson found when he came back through the area. So, of course, we know that it's the lion and the honey, the answer to the riddle. But no one else knew besides Samson, did they? His parents didn't know. He hadn't told them what had happened, that he had killed the lion. He hadn't told them where the honey had come from. So this was his riddle. So for 3 days, these companions tried unsuccessfully to decipher the meaning of this riddle. Now, this is going to cost them some money if they don't find the answer. So they really want the answer. So they put pressure on Samson's bride. And they tell her that she needs to entice Samson. It seems like Samson, as we know well, is enticed quite often, to give the answer to the riddle so that they don't have to give up all this stuff that they would need to give to Samson. They even threatened to burn down her father's house with fire if she doesn't get an answer from them. I don't know, seems like every television show that involves something like this, it's always like, does the person not think to go and tell somebody that this is what they've threatened? That always baffles me. Like, just go tell them. Don't fall for this. But anyway, she did. So she didn't want to take a loss of her family's home. And she didn't know the riddle. She had nothing to do with it. So she knew she was going to have to go to Samson and find out what it was, because if not, these companions were going to suffer a great financial loss, and she certainly didn't want her father's house burned down. She understood all this, and she knew she would have to do something in order to get rid of that threat to her life and her family. She probably had more allegiance to her family and her people than she did to Samson anyway, because this doesn't seem like they knew each other very well at this point. So she had motivation to actually satisfy their demands. And this is just one more reason Samson was foolish to marry under such circumstances. It's always foolish to marry someone before you actually know them. Samson's wife used a trick that people, it says here women, but I'm going to say people have used since time immemorial, to pressure Samson to explain the riddle to her. She accused him of not loving her. If you love me, you'll tell me the answer. Now this is a newlyweds or just about to be wed. He doesn't want that pressure on him. He wants her to think that he loves her. And this, of course, was nonsense. Why would love require him to tell her the answer to the riddle? That certainly wouldn't be it at all. And more than likely, to be honest with you, did Samson really love her, or was it lust? Because he didn't really know her. He hadn't really, according to this account, really spent any quality time with her. So love was really not even part of the equation, but yet this woman used it. There was not a single good reason why she should have to know the answer to this riddle. There's no reason why she would need to know that. So Samson replied to her, "But I haven't even told my parents the answer to this riddle. So why should I tell you? There's no reason why you need to know. You're not part of this group of men. You're not part of the bet, so to speak, that we have made." He could tell her, he could love her rather, without telling her the meaning of the riddle. And again, we're not so sure that he actually did love her. And he could love his parents without telling them the meaning of the riddle. Love had nothing to do with any of this. But his parents weren't pestering him for the answer, but she certainly was pestering him. And then so she goes to the next things. Now it's not working just to say, "Oh, if you loved me, you would tell me." Now she goes to crying and making him feel sorry for her, because if he really loved her, he certainly would tell her the answer to this. And then she was nagging him. And you know that sometimes even the best of us can give in to nagging. If anybody has had children or students that keep asking for the same thing over and over and over again, sometimes you end up giving in. For me, that's quite the opposite. I used to really say no, and I used to say to my students, you need to talk with my children. The more you ask, you're not going to get it. So don't keep asking. Just stop right there. But she was nagging. Oh, come on, Samson. What is it going to hurt for you to tell me the answer to this riddle? What am I going to do with the answer? I'm just curious. I want to know, and oh, if you really, really, really loved me. Yeah, and she's crying, you know, little tears, crocodile tears. You would tell me. She continued to weep and pester Samson for 7 days. I would have thought at this point, Samson would have said, see ya. I'm going home with my parents and find a nice Israelite girl to marry. But no, he was infatuated with her. Obviously, she was quite beautiful. And so, finally on the 7th day, he tells her the meaning. He made it 7 days. And then he tells her the meaning. And of course, what does she do? She runs right away to the companions that were celebrating with Samson, and she tells them the answer. So before the end of the 7th day, the men had the answer, and they gave it to Samson. They said, what is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? So of course that was the answer to the riddle. They knew the strong eater in the riddle was the lion, and the sweet food was honey. Samson then replied, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would have not solved my riddle. In other words, if you had not pestered and bothered my wife or wife-to-be, you would not have gotten the answer on your own, because he knew, Samson knew, the only other person that knew the answer to this riddle was him. There was no other way. If we hadn't read the beginning of that account of him killing the lion and then going back and seeing the honey, we wouldn't have been able to figure out the answer, because you actually had to see it or see it happen or hear it from Samson. So Samson points out their underhanded methods and that they had learned the answer to the riddle by a relationship with his wife, and if they had not pressured her, they never would have found out the answer to the riddle. He told them they weren't fair, they weren't honorable, and in short, they had cheated and by threatening violence. So he knew exactly what had happened. But Samson had made a bet, and so he was going to live up to the bet he made. And again, we're told the Spirit of the Lord is moving him, and he does get the garments necessary to pay his companions from another group of Philistines. He goes to a city far away from where they are now, in the district of the Philistines, and he kills 30 men and takes their clothing to pay off the debt. He was angry, obviously. He was angry at whom? Probably his wife, probably with the men that had tricked him. And I guess he probably was a little angry with himself for falling for the wiles of this particular woman. He then, we're told, goes home to his parents' house alone. Finally, he smartens up that this woman is really not somebody he needs to be with. He did not go to live with his wife, nor did he take her with him to live in the house of his father. The woman's father thought Samson's actions indicated that he no longer wanted this woman as a wife, so he gave her as a wife to the companion that Samson had chosen as his best man for the wedding ceremony. He assumed, in effect, that Samson intended to divorce her or just put her away. And even if they had really gone through what it requires to be married, we don't know. Now, it is a bit of a question as we look at the means in which Samson used to pay off his debt. He killed 30 men, but it was Philistines. and he was going to be fighting against them, and they were bothering the Israelites. And God's plan was that Samson would take care of the Philistines eventually. So he started a little soon, I guess, maybe we could say. He had every right to be angry, though, didn't he? With his wife, with the men who had tricked him and cheated him. But the men whom he killed had nothing to do with it. They were really innocent bystanders. They were in a city that was far away. They probably didn't even know what was going on. But it seems, even though again it says that the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, it doesn't necessarily mean that God was justifying what Samson did, just that he was giving him strength. And again, though, his main purpose was to get rid of the Philistines from bothering the Israelites, so I really can't say there. It doesn't, you can't be sure either from what's written in this chapter that Samson's wedding was completed. We don't know. We're really not told for sure. We're not really given details again. And this would have really depended on whether the wedding was going to take place at the beginning of the 7-day feast or at the end of the 7-day feast. If it had been at the beginning, then obviously they were married. If they were waiting till the end of the feast, then they wouldn't be married. And once they guessed the rule, he was pretty much gone at that point. They did use the term wife and husband, but oftentimes in translation, those are just words for woman and man. So again, we're not sure if they actually were married. The account shows that Samson later came back to cohabit with his wife, and this would seem to prove that they had married, even though she's given this little craziness here. However, she is killed in chapter 15. As we go on to the next chapter, we'll see how she's killed, ending their particular marriage. So it's a little confusing here as to exactly what happened, the time frame that it happened, but we do know certain things that are important. That Samson did have the strength that he needed to take care of the Philistines in later times. That he was living up to his Nazirite vow. We also know that he was a rebel kind of, in that he didn't want to listen to his parents and, wanted to do what he wanted to do. He was looking for a wife based on beauty, outside beauty, not inner beauty. He didn't care that she worshipped idols. And so we see that as we go on, and there are actually 2 more chapters about Samson and exactly what happens. So it's very interesting that with Samson especially, when God gives us a particular power, for Samson it was his strength, or a gift, each of us has a gift, we should use it in a way that God sees fit. Now again, killing of those 30 men from the other city who had nothing to do with any of it is not something that I think we think is right. But again, God wanted the Philistines out of the land of Israel. He wanted Israel to be on their own and doing what they needed to do, not being ruled over by the Philistines. So it's one of those iffy places in the Bible where we're a little confused as to what happens, but we actually know what it all means, so that's the good thing. So I want to thank you for coming out. We will again continue on with Samson next week, and we are going to close today's service with my father's favorite hymn, which is Still Sweeter Every Day, found on page 618, and we'll sing the first and third verses of 618. words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. God is good.
All the time.
Oh, yeah. You never know. I can still hear them. Good. You look good.